In 1994, a 30-year-old man walked away from one of the most prestigious jobs on Wall Street. His colleagues thought he was making a mistake. His parents thought he was crazy. And the reason he gave them was a single, obscure statistic almost nobody else was paying attention to. This is the story of how Jeff Bezos built Amazon and the actual numbers behind that garage startup story that most people get wrong. Let's start with who Bezos actually was before Amazon existed. He wasn't a college dropout or a garage tinkerer with nothing to lose. He graduated from Princeton in 1986 with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science, then spent nearly a decade working in finance on Wall Street, eventually landing a senior position at a quantitative hedge fund called D.E. Shaw. By 1994, he had a stable, highly paid career, and that's exactly the position he walked away from. The reason was a number: 2,300%. That's the annual growth rate of internet usage he discovered in the spring of 1994. He later said, "Things just don't grow that fast. It's highly unusual." That single statistic convinced him something enormous was coming, and he didn't want to miss it. Bezos made a list of 20 products he could potentially sell online. He narrowed it down to 5: books, computer hardware, computer software, videos, and music. He chose books, not because he loved reading more than the others, but because of the math. Books had low unit costs, universal demand, and more titles existed than any single physical store could ever carry. He and his wife Mackenzie left New York and drove cross-country to Seattle, writing the actual business plan during the drive. Seattle wasn't random either. It was close to Microsoft's talent pool and avoided sales tax complications that a location like California would have created. Here's where the real story gets misrepresented. Everyone knows the started in a garage version. What often gets left out is the actual capital behind it. Bezos personally invested $10,000 of his own money into the company. But that wasn't nearly enough. Over the following year, he took out $84,000 in loans, and then in 1995, his parents invested $245,573 of their own savings into the business. Bezos was honest with them about the risk. He told them directly there was a 70% chance they would lose every single dollar. They invested anyway. That single decision, a couple believing in their son's obscure internet bookstore, despite a near coin flip chance of losing their life savings, would eventually make them among the largest shareholders in one of the most valuable companies in history. The garage itself was real, but it wasn't glamorous. About 900 square feet, in a rented house in Bellevue, Washington. Bezos built the desks himself, using wooden doors from Home Depot with 4x4s as legs, because doors were cheaper than actual desks. That door desk became such a defining symbol of frugality that Amazon still references it in company culture decades later. The heating was unreliable. Early employees wore sweaters indoors. A bell rang every time someone placed an order on the website. Quiet at first, then ringing more and more often as word spread. Amazon officially launched on July 16, 1995. Within the first week, it sold $12,000 worth of books. Within 2 months, weekly sales hit $20,000. Orders were coming in from all 50 states and over 45 countries before the company had even built real infrastructure to handle that kind of demand. Now here's the part of the story that gets almost completely skipped. Amazon was not profitable for years. Not months, years. The company deliberately reinvested everything back into growth instead of pursuing profit, which frustrated investors who wanted faster returns. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2001, countless internet companies collapsed overnight. Amazon nearly didn't survive either, but it did. And later that same year, it posted its first ever profit, 1 cent per share, on more than $1 billion in revenue. A razor-thin margin, but proof that the model could eventually work. This is the piece most retellings conveniently leave out. The genius startup everyone celebrates today spent years looking like it might fail completely. So what's the actual lesson here? The one that applies beyond Bezos himself? First, he didn't start with nothing. He had an Ivy League education, Wall Street savings, and access to nearly $250,000 in family capital. That's not a knock against him. It's an honest acknowledgement that his starting point had real advantages most people don't have. Understanding that context matters more than blindly trying to copy his path. Second, the actual insight wasn't the garage or the frugality. It was recognizing an inflection point, a moment when something was changing at an unusual, undeniable rate, and being willing to act on it before it was obvious to everyone else. Third, Amazon's survival wasn't inevitable. It required years of tolerating zero profit, surviving a market crash that killed most of its competitors, and a level of patience from both Bezos and his early investors that most companies never get. The real story isn't a guy started a company in his garage and got lucky. It's a former Wall Street employee who noticed an unusual data point, made a calculated bet backed by real capital and real risk, and then survived years of uncertainty before the business model actually proved itself. That's a very different story than the mythologized version, and honestly, a more useful one, because it shows that even legendary success stories involve genuine risk, real financial backing, and years of patience before anything looked obviously right. If this gave you a clearer picture of how Amazon actually started, share it with someone who needs to hear the real version. Drop a comment. What's one overnight success story you later found out took years of struggle behind the scenes? See you in the next one.